Arturo, are we ready to start? Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is a meeting of the Urban Design Review Plan. Today is May 16th, 2025. We have one project review, Jefferson, and we will also have a briefing on the Builders of Hope anti-displacement toolkit that will discuss an informational briefing, as I understand. But before we get to the agenda items, we have to approve the minutes of last month of the April meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Second. Everyone in agreement, please say yes. Yes. Anyone opposed? The meeting minutes have been approved, great. And with that, would you introduce the project or the only project? Yes. That we have to review today.
Thank you, Eureka. So the Jefferson is a 1.7 acre property located north of I-35 in the Oak Cliff Gateway TIF District. We saw this just a few blocks west of the North Oak Cliff Apartments we looked at 2 months ago. The property was once home to Oak Cliff United Methodist Church. This adaptive reuse project aims to sensitively rehabilitate and convert a currently unused historic church campus and designated City of Dallas landmark into retail, office, and loft-style apartments. And the development teams here give you an overview.
Hey, I'm Eddie Darian. We're at the Crossy property. This is Michael for Texas. Alicia based right here in Crossy also. We've been working on historic buildings and old buildings in Oak Cliff for 14 years. This is a super exciting project for us on many levels. It's a really important corner in Oak Cliff, the Marsalis and Jefferson. Marsalis is going to be one side of the future gateway for Hoffman Park. It's an entrance into East Oak Cliff. It's also where historically a lot of Oak Cliff downtown was. The post office was right there. A lot of the old original stuff that kind of made up Oak Cliff's downtown when it was being annexed was right there. The project incorporates these 3 buildings. These are attached, but these 2 buildings were approved Part 1A for historic national estate. This building is not. We're incorporating state tax credits on these 2 buildings. There's a mixture of apartments and then commercial space. 41 apartments and 20,000 feet of commercial. Yeah, apartments for your form.
Does it complete your presentation?
Yes, that's it.
Can you tell us about the week we received a photograph during the week? Can you tell us about the state of the building, the ownership?
Yeah.
Current ownership, the event, the art developer.
Sure.
What is your plan? You just told us we have apartments and commercial space. How do you plan to lease out the space? Do you plan to manage? Do you plan to rent or to sell? Or what is and why not?
Yeah, sure. So we're a development company, but we typically hold everything that we develop. We develop what they intention to hold, and we self-manage. We have a management company that's in-house also. We already have over 100 apartments in Oak Cliff that we lease and manage. So, and then we also have commercial space in Oak Cliff that we lease and manage. So the management aspect is integrated into our company. It's really, we think a lot about that as we're developing it and how it's going to function and how it's going to work together. And it's owned, Proxy's the development company, it's owned with a LLC. We'll be developing it. The property is currently in extremely bad condition. There was a fire in this sanctuary area that kind of spread into this section over here where they connect. The stained glass windows are in horrible condition, which will all have to be, mostly will have to be repaired. The mean, it needs everything, there's nothing, the project doesn't need a foundation, so these two buildings are in very poor condition. So it's an extremely large renovation project.
Can you tell us a little about the history of the buildings? What were they before? When were they closed?
Yeah.
When you acquired them? Just
Yeah, so this built 1915, it's already a Dallas landmark, all three buildings are Dallas landmarks, the one that qualified for the national state. That is vacated, 2014. You would think that you walk in that it was vacated in like 1990. It looks like it's been vacant forever. But it's only been vacant since 2014. This building was built slightly, so this was the main one, 1915. This was built like 1929. And then this one was built like 40s or 50s.
And when we purchased it in 23.
Yeah, we've had it for a second. We purchased it and working on a plan. We kind of had to go back to the drawing board a couple times to figure out something that we thought would work.
The building on the far left is the education, it was the education building, 3 stories.
Yeah.
So they had classroom tables. And the one on Monsalis, was called the youth building. So that's where they had it, and it has larger spaces inside, but it's in the worst condition probably of all of them.
Outside of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
So far.
The sanctuary did have, when we purchased the property, we got literally 40 pages from the city of Dallas of code violations and, all these things that had to be brought up to a certain level, because the previous 2 owners essentially just allowed squatters to run free. Whenever we first went over there were like 2,000 people actively living in the education building because it was just quite a classrooms, and they were just kind of trying to bring them all at their own. So we dealt with squatters pretty bad over the past 18 months, but we put up a fence and we've been, beefed up security over there and stuff like that to prevent people from continuing to break in, because they were breaking with the intention to steal the copper, but the copper had been on for almost a decade now. And then just, they break in to steal copper, they peel the door off, they use grinders to cut the steel bars off the side of the building. And once they do that, they get in, spray paint the whole place, things like that, such stuff like that. The building, specifically the sanctuary, it's in such poor condition that one day I called the police to get some people out of there that were just, they'd been in it for days. They brought SWAT, and they would not allow the dogs to go in the building because the condition of the building was so bad they wouldn't allow the police
It was
dogs.
with the city's attorney's office when the bond surveyor worked for the city's attorney's office to bring the aspects of it. It wasn't convinced when we bought it, straight instead of security camera.
Okay, all right. So, thank you for the presentation. The way we do this typically is, and I will jump the end. The way we typically do is you present this to them. We will work to clarify anything that may not have explained, and then we want the feedback and recommendation. Okay. So, once again, I asked you before, is your presentation complete?
Yes.
For now? Yes. Okay. So let's start with question. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do. You can start wherever you like.
Right, let's start.
Okay. Well, mine pretty straight, pretty quick. One question is, I see a lot of images of how it could be. Where are you in the actual design? I'm sure the architectural stuff, it looks really pretty set. But the landscaping is obviously a big part of the presentation, and I don't see much in the way of specifics. Does it mean that you're having to design the landscaping into one?
We have a designed the landscaping, one of the most important things on this project is a ton of huge trees that are existing, so we're incorporating all of that into that landscaping plan. But yeah, so it's still in around the 50%.
Oh, okay. And then the other question I have is that, you know, without getting into the other part of it, I mean, the rendering, you know, it's a beautiful, prototypical, historic church in a mature landscape setting, that's great. But you got retail components here, and you got lease apartments and stuff, which suggests to me that there's gonna be a lot of signage that is not reflected in it. What if there's no signage at all? So someone would go down, if that is what it looked like, someone going down the street would still very much think that's a church. So how, what, and that's what would be important to us. What can you tell us about the proposed signage?
Yeah, so on the apartments, you know, like I said, we own 100 apartments in Oak Cliff already, and we lease those 100% via the online presence. So I'm not concerned about the apartments, but the commercial certainly depends on the tenants will have an opinion about signage also. And I think our current strategy is to have a monument sign somewhere, most likely. I mean, it's gonna, whatever we do is gonna be approved by the landlord commission, right? So on all, and that's not actually on all 3 facades because it's the local landlord. So that most likely, what I expect is that that will be the thing that they may approve some type of monument. They're not gonna want any signage on the actual structure.
And there is an existing church sign that, you know, marquee that they put up at some point that is existing, it could be incorporated if that's the way, so.
And we probably will have low scale weight that won't be, you know, it may not be visible from the street, but when you're on campus, we'll have, you know, directional signing pointing to different areas of the building.
Okay. And I have these questions to you specifically because your use plan shows activities and things on all sides. You know, our issue is urban design. And some of these are gonna be in the front. And I don't know if we're gonna have playground equipment out there that we're not seeing right now, which we would absolutely comment about and give you feedback on. And then how all that interacts with signage and all. So that's it's a beautiful image. I just wish, you know, devil's in the details here, and we don't have those details. So we're not gonna be able to help you as much as we might have otherwise without. And that's my question. I kind of wanted to answer the other part, but that's all I need.
Yeah, just a couple of things I think that, first of all, I really love it, that's a growing project. They, you know, use of facilities, so they do it. I just want to ask, it says on this graphic, enhanced paving, so what are you envisioning for that? Is it just paint or is it change of surface or what?
So the proposal right now is to reuse the existing parking lot and just paint. I think there's an existing parking lot and that's in reasonable shape. And I think part of their strategy is to reuse as much as possible the existing material.
That looks like it's asphalt.
Yeah, it's asphalt. There's portions, you know, there'll have to be a portion of it that is removed for,
Is it enough shape? Is it in enough shape structurally? This is, you just plan to listen to make it vibrant. Yeah. And also that, other area 6, is it like a watching ball court or what is it just in flux at this time?
Yeah, it's in flux. Those are kind of, we're making those back units. They're like, these are apartments on the back, but kind of the work apartments. We want to convert them to commercial if that demand arises. So likely this will initially just be kind of a clean order for the apartment, but if they being a going commercial use at some point, we want to have opportunity, but customize that to our tenant.
And this is, you know, they are like, these 2 buildings are connected, and that one is separate. In general, when the Google did, is it, how is it gonna be on service for utilities? Do you run 2 separate taps for each building, or is it, how does it, I'm just curious.
Yeah, right now it's all one.
Yeah, there's one transformer that feeds all 3 buildings right now.
So if they were going to, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, just a couple, I think, so you said there are 100 units?
No, we have 100 units now, but no, there's only 41 units.
Oh, 41. Okay, so this is an adequate amount of parking to accommodate all of them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then the sanctuary, it looks like, can you talk a little bit about what the vision is for the church part? Like, it looks like there's co-working space on the ground level, but then there's tenant space in the basement level. What kind of tenants are you envisioning?
Yeah, so we're talking with, a co-working space that would be an ideal use for this, especially with the amount of parking we have, and having a daytime use, mixed with the apartments would be great, from a function standpoint. So the idea is that the bottom, they've not decided if they would want to incorporate the bottom, the basement level. So those may just be separate spaces that we lease out individually, but we have the already at Oak Assembly, which is another church that we restored a mile from here. We have 22 private offices there, they're leased all day. 100% of the time. We lease them, it's a very affordable area, they're small. These for $800 house, almost like an apartment model, except for the suites. Hopefully though, the co-working space will actually want to incorporate those into their plans also.
Okay, because I was looking at the photographs and there are some windows down there, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay,
It's like a half basement,
Yeah, half.
so you go up halfway to get up to the sanctuary level
Okay.
because of the slope, and so there's windows in the back.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think that those are my questions.
Is the parking that is being provided responding to, and I know this was just approved Thursday, but the new parking requirements, which may be less than what is required in zoning code.
Yeah, I mean, based on like what we looked at, it's a lot, we want a lot less. They're just talking about the fact that depending on how you calculate the dart, it's half mile as the bird flies to the zoo station. So we may actually have no parking requirements here, but at minimum, there'll be huge reductions, which allows them to look at some other uses. And I think this is the perfect use case for like why that was an important thing to get passed, because if we can be thoughtful about making the campus activated at different times of the day, then I think you're gonna be able to have a lot more interesting uses that are appealing to the community and are amenities to the community. I mean, before basically food and beverage was like off the table, because you could have a party. So, but I think having a small coffee shop or something like that could work really well there and would complement.
The survey that you have doesn't show the parking, but it would be nice to soften that parking with some landscaping, that I guess we can provide comments later, so that's not a question, it's a supplemental comment. There's on the youth building, on the second floor, there's a door, the corridor that is showing up at the second floor. What is that door going?
It's on the side here.
It's on the short little section that has the second story. There's a door that is also showing up on the north elevation.
Oh, that would be secondary egress.
Yeah.
It would be an exit only, there's a fire escape there now that would be replaced with a true fire stair.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about accessibility, but I found they're accessible. So the accessible route to the old building, the old sanctuary is on the left-hand side. I was gonna ask if you were gonna have one in the front with,
Yeah, we have right here, if you look at the kind of where 9 is, this is in that around the elevator in the front.
that gives you access to both.
Yeah, it gets you to the elevator under here.
We have spent a lot of time on that, because none of the floors are lined, there's 9 floors on 9 different levels in there.
It's almost like
All
a
that
house.
floors,
Yeah. I may have missed it, but so where are you in the process? Or this is early? You're early.
I mean, we would like to break ground, for first quarter of next year.
Okay. Okay. Have you done any market research? Or you just feel pretty confident that
I
this
mean-
all will lease?
Yeah, we're confident, and you all actually, we're approved the East Dock project that we're working on the other side of 35 right now, and we. And we started, and it's not, we're on halfway through the construction.
I have any other questions?
Thank you, thanks, James. You know, next time that you come to see us, it would be good to have more information about the work. Sure, we have a package here with some preliminary drawings, but since we are an urban design focused panel, it would be good to have information about the neighborhood, the context, what is immediately to the right and the left of the street, what is the scale of the neighborhood, what is the character of the neighborhood, how does this fit into the neighborhood, how does it support the neighborhood, that kind of thing. That's what we are most interested in. And it's hard to make that, to understand what's going on if we have no visuals. On the residential buildings, I think I understand, but could you walk us through how do you calculate both buildings? The building to the left, building to the right, in relationship to the street and to the parking and to the neighborhood, what happens across the street? Can you give us an idea of who are the neighbors here?
Sure, there's a bus stop here, not a bus stop, bus terminal for like buses coming from Mexico and other locations. And same thing here, we have bus stops on both bus stations on each side of us. This is another, which not currently historic, but should be historic building. Here that what incorporated the original post office for Oak Cliff and many other things. It's currently like kind of a it's all retail, but probably only 50% occupied. And then across on this side is the city building. The access to the apartments is this one is the original classroom building, and what we tried to do with the classrooms is actually make every single classroom an apartment to try and stay true to the historic components of the building and keep the historic layout. So this essentially is the layout right now. We just have to bathrooms and kitchens and etc. Into those, but you have access that most of those people, you know, obviously I'd love them to enter from the front to bring activity, but realistically they're not going to, because they're going to park back here and then come in through here, which comes into an elevator and brings them into these spaces. These ones are our exterior entrances on these apartments.
Are there other apartments on the newer buildings?
Yeah, that's here on this one.
Yes.
Yeah, so-
Are there other apartments inside?
Oh, on the upstairs, yes, the upstairs has them also. They enter from here or this side, which we're calling the fire escape, but may actually be there. We may make that an open actual entrance also.
And I think what you're getting at is, it's a difficult project because you want to activate the street facade, the street, but all the parking, all the infrastructure was moved to the rear, you know, and because it's a local landmark and we're going for historic tax credits, we're very limited in what we can do to the front of the building. And, you know, as these buildings were usually built on plinths, we don't want to build a big ramp on the front of the building. So we're trying to be creative in how we integrate accessibility to the building. So we were able to have two accessible entrances that provide access to both the sanctuary building and the education building without significantly changing the exterior. There is a small elevator power addition in the rear, but very minimal. And just coming through sheer luck, we were able to get an accessible entrance. And then the idea is to create places that people would want to hang out. Right now, this corner is not a nice, I mean, it is traffic's 50 miles an hour down Jefferson. There's very minimal city infrastructure to make it pedestrian friendly. And so to design it for a future where hopefully it is pedestrian friendly, but with the reality that right now, that would be responsible.
Okay.
I have one more.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand, because I think that I mentioned that is something, are you planning to rebuild the sidewalk directly on the back side and along the frontage, or you're trying to, you think we are good enough to where they are?
This sidewalk's brand new. I'm not gonna build some towers, they're brand new they also did a big thing here with these crosswalks.
The one in the back.
I think the one in the back will probably already be on.
You want
I think it exists, but it's not.
I have one more question back to the issue of parking. You say we have 41 units on the original building,
41 total.
41 total, plus the co-working space.
20,000 square feet of structure.
And how many parking spaces do you have?
I think it's currently 60.
Yeah, I can do that real quick, but I don't remember.
You know, they have induction, like, you're induction, yeah, already.
Yeah, so from a city standpoint, we require them to be there very easily. But from a function standpoint, we have to be very thoughtful about who the commercial tenants are, because we're gonna have to find people that are either, that are all, like, that's why the co-working was appealing. Because when the apartment people are go to work, we can have people come in the office is appealing here. Compared to, say, going to the restaurant or something. So,
Look, I'm assuming that it has gone through a zoning approval with a
Correct.
site plan showing the parking analysis.
correct.
Yeah, so it looks very small actually to me too, for 41 units and 20,000 square feet of retail, only 60 spaces is, but if it's approved, somebody else, then that's good.
Yeah,
And I think that square footage for the retail, the vast majority of that is the actual sanctuary, which is difficult to program from a use space. And so it's not as efficient as you would as a normal retail, 14,000 square feet retail. That's part of that work.
okay, all right. Okay, what if we open up for comments and feedback?
I'm always ready. No one's jumping in there, right? I don't mean to monopolize.
No.
Anyway. Okay, well, thanks for coming forward. You may have detected, you've thrown us out of our rhythm here a little bit, you know, a lot of eyebrows today, and there's reasons for that. One, we're used to have people coming in here too late. They bring us projects that are baked, cooling in the cell, and you don't have much opportunity to make recommendations. You don't have that problem, you're in great shape here with this. But we're also, I mean, we don't get very many historic projects. And so we don't typically have projects with that much that's already predefined. This is a historic project with a very intact building, from the street. All of the relationships to the street and the space and all of that is set. The difference, you know, we do normally talk about things like activating, you know, we try to get the apartment, put some things on the street, combine with the street and all. That's not necessarily what you do here. You have an entirely different set of criteria for this building than what we normally see. And so we're all scratching our heads a little bit, I think, not me so much, but I recognize these issues. So I think, and so I think it's a great project. I think it does not do some things that we would normally want to do on an important urban context like this one, and that's, you know, a very common location, you know. And so I think it does really well. I think it's beautiful. The only concern I have is anybody, if you drive by that, you're going to want one of the kind of services are. That is what this is. And I do think it needs, I think for your sake, and I think what will ultimately happen is this will express itself as an adaptive reuse, one way or another. And we would love to talk to you about that, but you didn't give us any of that today. We don't have none of those components that you would bring out that tell people that this is not a church, that this is something else with the urban environment. None of that says that we have hints of it, we got activities here, activities there. And that's good. I don't have a problem with those activities and all, but we're not looking at what this is really gonna look like. And we don't really have a good feel at this point for how this is going to interact with the public. It's a very prominent location. So I would suggest that we could help you more if we had it. There's not a lot we can do here, and even if I wanted to, I'm not in a position to make recommendations for stuff other than balancing and keeping those blues carefully. You know, we really don't need a three-story climbing thing in the front lawn here, that would, you know, but I don't know if you're doing that or not. You don't know if you're doing that yet or not, and so, I would say the best I can do at this point is just, you know, y'all understand what appropriate means in this context, and whatever you do there, need to keep that in mind. Landmark and the state will help you immensely in keeping it appropriate. So that's and I think if done appropriately, I think it's a fabulous project, and I would recommend myself. So thanks for doing this. I think this is hopefully a bell cow most of our projects we see here soon to be kind of bell cow projects. They have the potential to influence other things in important neighborhoods. This is again a little different than what we see. Like usually it's a neighborhood that's just really completely depressed, and anything about what happened, they're going to start redeveloping everything nearby as apartments. That's not going to be the case on Jefferson. You've got a lot of existing infrastructure that's probably going to be retained and brought back, and you're going to be setting some standards for how that's done, and that's good. I think it's going to be a good project in that regard. Thanks. Thank you very much.
I'm a civil engineer, the traffic background, so some feedback is, I'll share that. But I was wondering about something on architectural side. When you are bringing this building in code, how do you satisfy, I'm thinking, for example, you have to put HVAC. Typically, you put it on rooftops, right? When you're gonna put it on the rooftop, will it not impact the historic nature of the building?
Yeah, it can.
And it has to be improved, or changing the windows or the glazing to make them energy efficient, so. You don't have to
do that.
You don't have to
We have exemptions
for that.
for some things. Well, it depends. Much bigger discussion than this.
Yeah, well, that's why I say I'm not gonna, so, anyway, from it's just because I know the site is what it is. So, but I would recommend a couple of things. One, please, run your site plan for, fire code compliance. And the reason is because I look at, luckily, I think the solutions are there, so I'm gonna point out a few specific items. If you look at your, fireway, along the back, one thing you want to make sure is you see the building is like roughly maybe 150 feet, like that, the building number, that building, so it's like 102 feet long, plus the space. So if you look at your, fireway, these days, the minimum is 26 feet. Right, so, but you are limited, you can see in your electrical control plan on your, things like the page right after topo. It is showing the 23 foot and 2 inches pipeline, and then the other one is, I guess but the solution to that is also, I don't also look at the headed parking. And that dimension from the face of the parking to the back end is 20. Well, I know there's a couple of feet you can see from, it will solve the problem. As you do that, also please confirm your accommodations for that driveway. You may not be even the parking, but at least the return radius has to be 5 foot of park. And then if you keep that parking less than 50 feet, just marking, you don't have to do a turn. Or it can go straight all the way, but you can basically do that part. And it was a similar thing I noticed on the parking on the back side as well. If you kind of tweak it just a little bit, you should be able to run it all of it. But if not, at least the front part up to the edge of the building, which is your apartments, you need to look at that. My second comment was parking obviously is a key for everything. And I noticed you moved the dumpster from the far corner to that or the middle, which is one way closer. But it's very inefficient. You can easily add maybe perhaps 3 more spaces. And from a user perspective, also it is not very efficient, because the truck has to come in and go around and then pull back, and he's doing a 3-point turn versus going straight in. If you don't mind keeping the dumpster back where it was, or there is all in dead end 5-lane lane, there's green space there next to the tree. That would be also not that far, down with the truck goes straight in, takes it up, it goes, and you can pick up probably 3 or 4 spots. Yeah.
Great.
And that's it. Otherwise, thank you. I mean, I love it, at least there's able to be used, and so good job.
I'm trying to think. I'm sort of a artsy romantic type, so I will just preface, what may come out as sort of a string of incoherent thoughts, so just bear with me. I think that I would ask you first, why are you here today?
Yeah, the only reason, I mean, the reason we're here is the only way this project happened is, because this is impossible. Happens, that's it, fun, so, I mean, we like fixing old buildings, and we like have been doing that. You know, we always say we wanna make money, we become an old, so really not fixing these projects for us, and being involved in the community and doing stuff that is positive. So, obviously like a challenge, keeps everyone living, I think it's a good challenge, so the comments ones that we got.
Okay, that's great. I'm happy to hear that because it was hard to tell, it felt, and I'm also coming off a year of teaching, so forgive me for that too, but, I think that that's kind of what I'm missing. I feel like this is such an exciting project based on its location, even the physicality of the intersection, like this Marsalis Jefferson corner, it feels really important. And the building itself is really important. So I'm always happy to see adaptive reuse because I think that in Dallas, we're so fast to tear things down. So it's great when we can see projects like this that are being used. But it feels like it's a project that could be built anywhere and do anything, you know, it's sort of, for the program that it is what it is, and so we need that type of project, we need more density and we need integrated mixed use, all that. So I guess I'm wondering what the real vision is and how this is serving an urban need. I think that we can all sort of get together and make assumptions about your own motives and what you're trying to do with this, but as you move forward in the process, I think a little bit of, what is sort of bringing this together from that romantic, poetic sense, you know, and that may sound really dumb, but I think that there is some passion in this project that I'd like to hear a little bit more about. So I think that a lot of us can give you sort of technical advice on what needs to happen, but how is this serving a critical urban need? How, again, I think that, you know, if Matt Stubbs were here also to talk about the landscaping, because that is the sort of front-facing part of this whole project. How is that plaza being used? You know, it's mentioned a couple of times that it is a plaza, but I guess the use of this project and how you imagine people coming to this building and falling in love with it. Because again, it does serve this really critical need at this time with the deck park and all the stuff. So I don't have any maybe useful information or feedback to give you, but I would love to hear a little bit more about the passion and the vision of it and what it's doing for the community.
So this may not be the answer that you're wanting, but we just a few years ago completed the Oak Cliff Assembly, which is a very similar project to this 20,000 foot church, also a landmark facilities for didn't use credits or city funding on it, but and we during the main space into the theater and we'll do a bunch of art events with like a couple hundred events now, and we operate ourselves and what I've learned is like what we're really passionate about is fixing buildings and like making them and working on old projects, and we're not like the people that are gonna come in and come up with the perfect idea for the sanctuary space. Like we need someone else that's gonna come in with the romantic idea that's gonna be like and has that like the vision to make this thing like their entire life. Because like for us, we're gonna finish this project, and we're gonna be doing my heart's gonna be on to the next project. So like, does that make sense? Like, really, the goal here is to find a community partner that wants to operate and
Okay.
that wants to be, you know, the guy that's, or girl that's in that every single day.
You're
So-
making it pretty for whoever has.
And then looking for the perfect person that wants to like make it their life. Because that's what it needs, is someone that's gonna make it their entire life. So, and we did that at the assembly, we like made it our entire life, and I'm just like, that's not what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about the actual building aspect of it.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know, like I said, maybe that's the answer you're looking for.
But it's, yeah, it's an honest answer, so I appreciate that. And I don't say this to discourage you from continuing to do what you do, because we absolutely need you to continue to do this work. But yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
I'm very excited that you and your team are, wanting to do this. I mean, this building, based on what you were saying, is in a really bad state. And having a group like yours that is passionate about rebuilding, old buildings and bringing them back to life is really exciting. So, I'm thrilled about it, and I hope you continue with that passion and you do this one, get somebody to bring some life to that church, to the church itself, and move on to another one, because we should have more of those types of buildings that we have. I would encourage you, what we see here in the side plan seems really nice in terms of the front of the building and how the sidewalk and kind of the meandering. There are some existing mature buildings, so I encourage you, you're thoughtful about thinking that that's going to be pretty interesting. Existing trees that we want to keep and continue to think about how we can make that landscape improve the current conditions, because the corner is really nice. This side on Mercedes might need a little bit more help than just some additional planting. The area that I'm least excited about is the parking area, of course. I know that you have challenges with respect to the existing amenities. But with the opportunity of parking reductions, you talked about perhaps increasing the use of the density to optimize that, and I would also encourage you to think about maybe there are a few places where you're not maximizing the parking, you're actually bringing some shade and some trees and some permeability on that side of the project that it's really needed. So,
Okay, thank you, Martin. James.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna echo a lot of what everyone said. You know, this would be a great charrette project. You know, this would be so much fun. I can almost see it. You know, I'm a landscape architect, not architect, but I could see it some new glass cube, you know, something that kind of links everything up. Because when I look at it, the plan, it feels, yeah, it does feel kind of fragmented and broken. I understand what you're doing. I've always admired that building. I think it's cool. I think the challenge for you is going to be, as Norm said, you know, it feels like somebody's going to, I can hear people say, oh, they're going to open the church again. You know, it's, whenever they complete it, is the Methodist Church going to have services there. I think that's going to be your challenge. I started thinking about examples in Dallas and other places that have, I think, been fairly successful in converting a church like that to other use that don't, you know, it doesn't feel like an old sanctuary. The one that came to mind immediately is like the Ascension Coffee over there on Garland Road, right in Casalinda. You know, everything's still there, but it kind of works the way they did it. And they've got the new building right to the left of it, and then the one uptown. It feels, there's one there in uptown. I was trying to Google where that is. It's at Fairmount, Mayan. Yeah, I'd say that, but those are some examples. Because I think that's a big challenge. I think it's a noble cause. I love the fact that I've always, you know, driven by that building a million times and thought, well, that's a shame. And I think with the deck park coming on, I think this area is going to see a lot of growth. I think the connectivity, the street, you know, the connectivity down Marsalis, you know, to the new park is going to be super important. So the treatment of that sidewalk, I agree. You got a new sidewalk on Jefferson, but this one is really wants to feel more, that space, in the right hand side of your image there on the right. I think that sidewalk's gonna be highly traveled. Yeah, I really don't have any other comments for you at this time. Like I said, I could echo what everybody else has said, but I feel like it's got a lot of potential. And it's gonna be a tough task to make it not feel like just a rehabilitated church.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's right, okay, thank you.
I'm done.
Very good, thank you. So, it's clear that, from what you have heard, that, the panel, endorses and supports the initiative. Of course, every time you have a historic building that has meaning to the city, every time we see someone taking it on and bringing it back to life, of course, we celebrate. So we support the initiative, we are happy that the building is going to be brought back to life. But the very reason, and some of my peers here brought that up, the very reason why you are attracted to this structure, to this building, as you said, please come in.
AJ.
AJ, very, the reason why you are attracted to this, while you have done a similar rehab to another building similar to this. So the very reason is that it has character, it has history, it has meaning, right? So how do we, and the fact that you are tackling this on a city like Dallas is even more meaningful. And we all know that Dallas doesn't pay much attention to its history. So once again, we applaud you for doing this. That's wonderful. But once again, the very reason for you to be doing this is the character of the building, the history, the memory. How could we how could you reference that history as the building continues on its second stage of its life? How to not to erase the past? Yes, you heard again from some of my peers, it looks like a beautifully renovated church. Well, it's not. But if it's not, what is it and what was it and how can we communicate that? I'm being a bit hazy here, I understand, but would there be, so the recommendation is, would there be a way or ways to reference that past, to either by means of an exhibit inside this sanctuary somewhere in the lobby, I don't know, maybe outside, maybe inside and outside that plaza. What's the character of the plaza? Can the plaza incorporate elements of history of the neighborhood, of the building, of the congregation that was there 100 years ago? And I think that's the thing that will connect us all, the neighborhood, everybody in Dallas to, okay, look, something else happened here before, and now we have business ABC or residents or whatever. So instead of leaving people wondering, what is this? Is it a church? No, it's not. It's an office. Well, but it looks like a church. What's a church? Is it an office building that built to look like a church? It's confusing, right? So again, the recommendation is there a way? And
You're gonna get me started here in a minute.
Absolutely.
I'm sitting up straight.
I want you to get Is there a way to reference that past? It's rich, it's beautiful, and that is the very reason for this to be worthy of attention. No.
Let's go the other way.
Yeah.
I go to the Ascension Coffee all the time, and that's a beautiful facility. This is nothing like that, because Ascension Coffee for sure didn't go after tax credits. Wasn't a city. It's not a city of Dallas landmark. As much as my architect friends would love to interpret this historic building, and we do that often, this is not a candidate for that. This building should be brought back and its full history on display as the building that it was. Does that send a message that people may not understand? Possibly. but its contribution historically to that neighborhood as a church is front and center. These owners don't have much choice there if they want to take advantage of the approval processes and the exemptions and for the code and for the historic tax credits that are very powerful and made available to this. That's what I kind of mentioned earlier. This is very unusual for us. We don't typically get one like this. What was it? The hotel, historic hotel in Stevens, it used to be the jail facility. That's the last one kind of like that we had, but they had far more latitude there, and they still protected most of it. And what they were doing wasn't that far different. This is a little bit, admittedly. So I agree with you. I think we do. I do agree that, and it's going to have to read. It's going by default going to read differently. I don't know if anybody's really going to mistake it for a church, but they might. If they did it like this, they would. I think for sure. But as a true important historic building on every level, what you see is what they're pretty much required to do, and they have done it well. And that's why I was concerned about the other things that are not directly impacted that way. What else is going to happen around it? How's the landscape going to work? Can we send some of those clues and some of those elements that we don't have? So, not an argument, sir. It's just, I consider this a unique project for us. That's why I said this guy's out of our rhythm a little bit there. We just can't approach this one the way we want.
Just and for the record, I'm not in any way suggesting that we add something to the building that we question the character. That's what you work with. But I am in support of bringing the building back as you described, what it is, what it was, what it is now. My point is, what can we do, what can AJ do in order to preserve the memory, preserve the history, display the history and the memory of the place. Otherwise, whoever is interested in the history will have to Google, okay, what was here on Jefferson, Marsalis, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Well, can we make it evident? Can we somehow make that character evident to everybody, to everybody who interact with you now, and from now on? That's what I'm
Okay. I'm sorry, if I missed it, but I kind of got the impression that you were wanting to change the expression of that history so that we had latitude. Good.
No, right there.
Then never mind. Forgot to say no.
I'm probably the wrong person to comment. I'm a lifelong Methodist, so if there's something, no offense, but there's something creepy about me on the Methodist church. It's like, I'm probably the wrong person to be making comments on this today. It's like, how do I make it not feel like that, sir? Unless that be for some people, probably not for me.
All right.
I was just telling us that this is nothing to do with feedback. Because of what I've heard, so there was no way to make financial sense out of it if you kept the use that was the original use. Like, there is no money in church business.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but it's also a functional problem with making this a church game because of the parking lot. You would need to have a church that would kind of urban core like this, and have a facility this large, would need like 500 or something. So this could be no market appeal for a church. The other one I mentioned, we have actually 2 churches on the outside, in addition to a theater, in addition to so that's another way to look at these old churches is, hey, maybe it can still be a church, but maybe the church is a tenant instead of the owner, and then the owner is allowed to have a little more freedom on what we're doing with it.
Yeah, what happened with this church and why they abandoned their building basically is that they couldn't afford the maintenance of it. And it's the same story over and over again. I mean, AJ bought the Zion Missionary Baptist Church for the same reason. It was demolition by neglect, basically, and that's what this building was headed for. The congregation that was left there were like 10 people, and they merged with Tyler Street Methodist Church, which is now Tyler Street Church. They took the Methodist out of their name. So you're right about all of what you said about capturing the history of the building. That's what we all here like to do. And we've had help with the whole tax credit, getting that paperwork together and researching the history of it. So we have all of that documentation that we will happily set up a display area, probably very prominently, and they've done that at the Zion Missionary Baptist Church as well, you know, just celebrate that history of the building itself. And the people that the people that built it. We still have a slight connection to the Tyler Street Church, and they are still interested in the building. It's just they can't afford the building. But they're very interested in, you know, keeping the stained glass windows intact. And of course, Landmark Commission is interested in that. A backstory about the windows is that some of the windows have been taken out, like in the past month, so to the past year. Vandals have taken away some of the stained glass windows. So we actually got approval from Landmark Commission to go ahead and remove the important windows and put them in safe storage. So right now it's boarded up and secure, but those windows are not behind the boards, they're in storage and will be put back in.
Ironically, you want an example of this problem you're looking at right now. For service drive signs, this is exactly, they haven't fully done the bricks.
I think when you're paying homage to the history, you can do that in really obvious ways or more nuanced ways. Like the Oak Cliff Assembly, one of the, their phrase, it was down in Hills Spring actually, which is the second church that was there. Phrase was where everybody is somebody. And like we've taken that, it's like all over our stuff. So it's like these different ways that should kind of come and connect with history, but we're all like obsessed with history stuff. We'll come into the Dallas Money News archives and look into all the old stuff and find more good fun aspects that we can incorporate.
That's great.
It should be printed out all over.
That's one. So yes, every way that you can celebrate, make it evident, make it history evident, as you're saying, as we are suggesting. I think that will be good for you as from a business standpoint, good for the city, the memory of the city, good for all of us. Any other comments, feedback from the panel? Well done. We applaud the effort. People in churches that are boarded up.
Don't tell them that.
But don't tell them down. And we would invite you to come back, as we know, as you told us, you are very early in the process. As the project develops, as the project evolves, come back and see us. Our intent is to provide guidance, support you and provide guidance, to make it a better project, understand the realities of construction, of business, of performance, etc. We know all of that. But we also have an amazing panel of experts here with different backgrounds that can help you in making it all that you can do. So, thank you for coming to the panel today, and I'd like to see you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Great. Were you able to capture the comments? Would you
It's
like?
down and I, but we've got it.
Great.
We'll get that together. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Could you give us a preview of the comments?
I can. Let me do a little improv.
But they actually wait. Why are they like, they're not taking notes?
Pretty much everything.
You want me to give a little?
You want me to do that?
Yeah, go for it, Doc.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Can't do it. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And I'm a bit of an novice at this, so, you know, very basically started, it's not gonna be 30, and we had pushed it to, the last meeting was at Blues. AJ, thank you for your description of the proxy about, the fact that this is, basically this church has been, 14 years, it's been sitting as it is. Also, basically, it had gone through the fire, and other damages, you all explained very well.
challenges we had as far as SWOT, things like that, and you to basically show that this is, sorry, excuse me. They're just interested in the recommendation. In the recommendation. All right, let's get to that. I told you I was a novice. Okay, so the recommendations basically, I think they're kind of 10 pages. So the recommendations. Oh, I can help out. Here he goes started basically and said, you know, we asked originally about the, you know, the 41 dwelling units, so how many parking spaces, roughly about 60 was the answer. Also, some of the recommendations were, you know, obviously, authorized zoning approval, Norm asked, maybe asked about, where you're on the project, mentioning historic types of projects in front of us like this. Basically, we first comment is Norman mentioned it's a great project that does not do urban design that's closely. Obviously, you're limited what you have as far as your site context, as far as the sidewalks and things. You already have new sidewalks, but as far as how to address the street, you're kind of limited in your space. Appreciate the fact that it's adaptive use. But there is also concerns about the fact that it's still visually going to look like a church and how to program it to make sure that it still communicates what the intention is. So it's a bit of a balancing act, as I mentioned, but it's appropriate with the context of what you're given. If done well, it can be very successful. Make sure that you set the standards. Also, we mentioned that civil engineering, you know, would be concerned about things like HVAC on the rooftop, water limitations. Also, we had a comment about the site plan itself, the fire lane being 26 feet, the construction of 20, parking spaces concerns. Make sure that the parking itself works well with the actual function of the building, even though we know that you have a lot of limitations. Questions of what was here, I was answered this. Yeah, with funding and challenges for these restoration. As an adaptive use, it feels like it could be almost anywhere in some sense, but you know, the question was, what is the real vision? What brings this all together? What's your passion? So basically, your answer was, how does it all serve into an urban need? How does it serve? How will it kind of work off the momentum of the deck park that's close by, make sure that the connections work from there. You mentioned also when you this great, so the goal is to find a community partner or champion. They get in here after your project is complete. There's also there was excitement as far as how passionate of historic preservation. Recommended saving the mature trees as much as possible, and potentially also adding more trees. And if now that we've had the recent with the parking referendum, we may have the opportunity to have maybe less parking in some cases, and a little more green space so that the community there has a little bit more space outside. So there's a bit of fragmentation with the buildings as far as how you can convert the charm to something else. There's also mention about relationships to other churches and things like essentially the one. So everyone endorses the fact that it's adaptive reuse, celebrates the initiative. But it's very important that the character that they have an opportunity to really try to think about the history itself. Obviously not to erase the past, but find is there opportunities that you can find to think about the context, the neighborhood character, and basically the community connection to it. Mentioned. So basically, I hope this is helpful, but I think the final comments too, quite a bit is what can you do to preserve the memory? How do you make this evident? Obviously, people are going to be confused. It looks like a church, feels like a church, but how can you make it still have that honor of the church itself, but not obviously miscommunicate that? So it's a bit of a challenge that you have as far as the building itself. the visual cues, there was some discussion about wayfind, about signage and things like that, make sure that you're honoring it. You mentioned you're not gonna fill in the building, you're not gonna do some things to alter the structure itself. Also there's been some mention about that you have documentation as far as the windows are concerned, and how you can put that back into place. And the last comment was basically, we really appreciate this, we'd like to come to where everybody is somebody, and also, the committee would like to invite you back to basically, see where you are in the process, and you understand the condition of the support this now. More or less.
Thank you. So you will receive written version of this one, in, send, and you will have access those as you continue to work. Right? Okay. With that, I think the review is, complete.
We have some
Next
coffee
agenda.
and treats now, if we want to grab something quickly before our presentation from Stephanie.
So, couple minutes break. Yeah, that's very.
Okay. Pretty cut.
Sorry.
Going back.
Sit down. Take your turn.
Thank you.
All right, committee,
I remember that page.
yes, your name is.
My name is Stephanie Chan.
Stephanie, do you have any presentation for us?
Yeah.
Is it May? Is it May?
Yes.
Sorry, Donna. Yeah, just because, you know, it might have been 2 or 3 months ago when we announced the project, and the question came up about what is the city doing, or are they able to do anything to help combat the displacement that we start to see occurring in many of the areas that we see projects in. And so we reached out to Stephanie Champion with Builders of Hope. Is here today to present some of the work that she's recently finished, and it was a 2 or 3 year process, right? And she's going to tell you all about that, and I think you'll be really impressed with what the work that's coming out of this. So hopefully it'll help us better understand as to what is possible in our areas.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Arturo or Stephanie, can you, what is the relationship, what is the nature of the relationship between your work and City Hall?
Yeah, I'll share a bit more about the project background and how we got here as part of the presentation. But, and then when you have more questions at the end, I'm happy to sit down.
Thank you.
I also brought physical copies of the toolkit, so I'd love to hand those out if you guys want to follow along. But I also have a PowerPoint presentation that will be going.
Yes.
And then I have extra copies if staff wants them later. But good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Once again, my name is Stephanie Champion, and I serve as Chief Community Development and Policy Officer for Builders of Hope CDC, Builders of Hope Community Development Corporation. We are a multifaceted, community-based development organization. Our mission is to build thriving communities by making investments in people and the places where they live. We accomplish this through constructing and preserving quality affordable housing, building community, cultivating public policy, and creating access to economic opportunity. So I'm here today to present on our recently released anti-displacement policy toolkit entitled A Right to Stay. Next slide. Thank you. Before anytime I talk about this work or displacement in general in Dallas, I think it's very important to recognize the origins of displacement on this land, and that is the dispossession and forced removal of indigenous communities. The land that we now recognize as Dallas was once a thriving home and key trading point for many indigenous tribes, including the Tawakani, Wichita, and Kickapoo people, who experienced mass displacement and genocide in the 19th century. The descendants of these tribes persist in preserving and celebrating their cultural heritage, and we honor their work and resilience as we fight to protect vulnerable residents and neighborhoods across Dallas today. Next slide. So this is a bit of our project background. In 2022, we secured grant funding from the JP Morgan Chase Foundation and the Dallas Foundation to create this citywide anti-displacement toolkit to address the specific needs of Dallas neighborhoods experiencing gentrification and displacement. In 2023, this is to your question, we entered into an MOU with the city, stating our joint intention to collaboratively develop policy addressing the needs of vulnerable residents facing displacement in Dallas. That MOU was very much just, we intend to do this together, but there was no guarantee of policy adoption. Of course, that is our hope, and that is still our hope. So the piece now that we are doing as I get to the end of our toolkit is continuing to advocate for the adoption and implementation of our recommended policies. We spent 2 years conducting policy research, developing and refining our neighborhood mapping methodology, conducting extensive community outreach and engagement in our 3 target communities, and drafting and compiling the policy recommendations. And we finally published and released this toolkit in November of last year. We presented to Council's Housing and Homelessness Solutions Committee in February and just completed a series of community conversations in our target neighborhoods. Next slide. While Builders of Hope is leading this work, it's very much been a collaborative partnership with policy experts, data professionals, engagement specialists, and community stakeholders across the city. We're incredibly proud to convene such a strong team of experts across multiple fields, and are especially grateful to our policy advisors, Heather Way and Dr. Cullen Clark, as well as our advisory committee members. Next slide. Our vision for this toolkit is to create lasting and impactful policy change within the city of Dallas, ensuring three things. One, that vulnerable residents and historically marginalized communities have the right to stay, as well as the opportunity to return to their neighborhoods in the face of rapid development and rising housing costs. That over time, opportunities remain for new low-income residents to move into the community, and that all residents, but especially those most vulnerable to displacement, have a meaningful role in shaping the future of their neighborhoods. Next slide. So what are we talking about when we describe gentrification? Because we know we have a housing crisis across the city, an affordable housing crisis across the city and across the country, right? But we are not attempting to solve the entire crisis. We are attempting to impact a very specific problem, which is gentrification in historically marginalized communities. So we define this as a process of neighborhood change in which you see a number of things happening. First, new investment floods a historically marginalized neighborhood. Then you see property values rise, increasing housing costs and reducing the existing supply of affordable units. You see the physical transformation of the neighborhood through the influx of new higher-end construction. Neighborhood demographics start to shift as new higher-income residents move in, and existing low-income residents, most often Black or Latina, are directly or indirectly displaced. Finally, you see the cultural character of the neighborhood is fundamentally and forever altered by this change. Gentrification results in various types of displacement. Direct displacement occurs when residents can no longer afford to remain in their homes due to rising housing costs. This can look like evictions or lease non-renewals. It can also just look like your rent's going up in an unsustainable way that you can't afford to keep up with. Or it can look like constructive evictions as landlords refuse to make needed repairs on units as they await future development opportunities and force tenants out that way. Indirect displacement refers to changes in demographics with regards to who can afford to move into a neighborhood as lower income residents are moving out. Finally, cultural displacement is the practice of making communities feel unwelcome or alienated in their own neighborhoods. So even if they are afforded the right to stay, they may not feel like it's their neighborhood anymore because so much has changed around them. Next slide. So in our effort to understand how and where gentrification is taking place in the city of Dallas, we set out to map every neighborhood in the city based on stages of neighborhood change and displacement risk. Our study tracks neighborhood change in Dallas over a 10-year time frame from 2011 to 2021. So when I get to the maps, keep in mind these are very much kind of like snapshot maps, point in time maps. But our approach adapts and builds on the gentrification mapping methodology originally developed by Professor Lisa Bates at Portland State University in 2013, and since been adapted by many cities across the country, including in 2018 in Austin by the University of Texas Uprooted Project, led by Professor Heather Way, who was also served as an advisor on this project in Dallas. Our methodology utilizes a three-part gentrification analysis, which examines 1, where vulnerable populations live in the city, 2, which neighborhoods are experiencing demographic change, and 3, the strength and growth of neighborhood housing markets. Next slide. So this is our first map. The first part of our analysis looks at which neighborhoods in Dallas have high concentrations of residents who are especially vulnerable to displacement in the face of rising housing costs. As you can see, we have our vulnerable communities are highly concentrated in the southern sector of Dallas, but there are also high pockets of high vulnerability, in the north as well. Next slide. The second part of our analysis assesses changes in demographics over time, indicating that vulnerable residents are moving out of the neighborhood, while less vulnerable residents are moving in. Keep in mind, this is from 2011 to 2021, so a lot of the post-COVID change is not captured by our study. Next one. A third part of our analysis measures and classifies each neighborhood by the strength and growth of their neighborhood housing market. Housing market strength and change were evaluated using home sale prices, investment levels, home sale prices and rents, investment levels and turnover rates. As you can see, a large portion of the southern sector is categorized as accelerating, that orange color, which is putting significant pressures on what we know are already very vulnerable communities. Finally, next slide, thank you. We have our full gentrification methodology, which uses data from the previous 3 maps to characterize each neighborhood as one of 6 categories of gentrification. Susceptible neighborhoods are the areas in brown that have not yet experienced significant demographic or housing market change, but are adjacent to accelerating or high value areas. And you've got early type 1 and early type 2. Early type 1 neighborhoods are the areas in orange. These are neighborhoods that are experiencing market pressures but have not seen demographic change. And then early type 2 is the flip, areas that are seeing the demographic change but we're not yet seeing that pressure in the market. Dynamic neighborhoods are the areas in yellow. These are neighborhoods that are experiencing both high market pressures and demographic change. Late neighborhoods are the areas in blue that are well into the process of neighborhood change. These neighborhoods have sustained and high value markets and have experienced demographic changes as well. Finally, historic loss, our final category. Those are the areas in dark blue. These are neighborhoods that experience gentrification and displacement outside of the time frame of our study. So we expanded it to an additional 10 years to capture those neighborhoods as well. They include areas like Elm Thicket, North Park, the Cedars, and Kidd Springs and Oak Cliff. Next slide. So our findings show that displacement pressures are really varied and widespread throughout the city of Dallas, with over 40% of neighborhoods either susceptible to or currently experiencing some stage of gentrification from early to middle to late. And while much of the city is feeling these pressures, there are also key indicators that illustrate where gentrification may accelerate faster in some areas than in others, namely proximity to the urban core, and the presence and location of targeted public investments like bond projects or place-based economic incentives like TIF districts. So our final map, there we go, has TIF districts overlaid on top of our neighborhood typology. And most of the neighborhoods classified as dynamic in the southern sector fall within or adjacent to the TIF districts in those areas. So our analysis ultimately reveals that social vulnerability, market forces, and public policy all play a role in creating or exacerbating displacement pressures in Dallas neighborhoods. Understanding how these factors interact in the context of gentrification allows us to better address the needs of vulnerable residents and intervene early to mitigate displacement and preserve our treasured neighborhoods and communities before we lose them altogether. As Dallas continues to grow and develop, we must be highly intentional about where and how that growth happens, prioritizing development that is inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. Next slide. All of that leads us to our policy goals and recommendations, which are guided by the vision statement I shared earlier and organized around these 3 overarching goals. So first is protecting vulnerable residents from direct displacement. That's kind of like stopping the bleeding now. 2 is preserving and constructing affordable housing that is appropriately targeted to existing and future vulnerable residents. And 3rd is building and resourcing community power to promote neighborhood self-determination and community stewardship of land and business development. So we've got about 30 some odd recommendations in here. I'm going to try to kind of group them and categorize them. And then I'm going to share our top 5 recommendations for the city of Dallas at the end. But number 1 is protecting vulnerable residents from direct displacement. And this goal includes specific recommendations for both protecting vulnerable renters as well as vulnerable homeowners. For vulnerable renters, we have tools such as emergency rental and relocation assistance programs and community preference policies. For homeowners, those include tools like property tax relief funds and targeted home repair programs. Next slide. Goal 2 includes recommendations for both preserving existing affordable housing units, such as the creation of an affordable housing preservation network, and a new displacement mitigation zoning overlay, and for creating new units through the adoption of a public land for affordable housing policy and a comprehensive density bonus program that includes single family as well. It also emphasizes the need to ensure that those affordable housing programs appropriately target low income and vulnerable residents, serving our most vulnerable households. Next slide. Finally, goal 3 focuses on building community power and creating opportunity for community control of real estate development through capacity building initiatives, inclusivity and equity in city planning and development decisions, and shared equity housing models. Our toolkit ultimately offers dozens of recommended policies, strategies, and solutions for diverse stakeholders interested in addressing displacement pressures in vulnerable Dallas communities. And while adoption and implementation, of these recommendations is critical to success and achieving our goals, we recognize that this cannot be accomplished by one entity alone. However, the City of Dallas does and should have a very large role in this effort. Next slide. So with that, we've identified our top 5 recommendations for the City of Dallas. And those are first, adopting enhanced legal protections for tenants to the fullest extent allowable by state law, including mandatory tenant protections in all rental properties participating in any city subsidy or incentive programs, including TIF programs, and a citywide tenant rights organized ordinance, and a continued resolution to fund the provision of legal and mediation support for vulnerable tenants facing eviction. Number 2, facilitating the establishment of an affordable housing preservation network to collectively monitor and track at-risk multifamily properties and collaborate with both private sector and nonprofit entities on preservation strategies, including property acquisition and rehabilitation. Third is adopting a right-priced affordable housing policy for all city housing programs that lowers existing income targets to prioritize households earning 50% and below for rental units and 80% and below for ownership units. 4 is incorporating and prioritizing shared equity housing models across all city housing programs to promote housing and neighborhood stability and create permanent affordability with our city subsidies. Finally, 5 is prioritizing the development of the displacement mitigation zoning overlay or other similar tool to preserve and stabilize the physical and built character of neighborhoods with high concentrations of naturally occurring affordable housing that are at increased risk of teardowns and redevelopment due to gentrification. And I think that's it. Yep. So that's my brief overview for now. You have physical toolkits in front of you. The one piece I didn't mention in our presentation is we also included neighborhood case studies. So this toolkit first attempts to understand where gentrification is and map those pressures across the city. But then we also wanted to tell very authentic stories of neighborhood change from a human perspective. And we focused on 3 different neighborhoods. Those are West Dallas, South Dallas, and Vickery Meadow. And we chose those neighborhoods to reflect the diversity of Dallas neighborhoods from both a socioeconomic and housing market perspective. So you have neighborhoods there that are predominantly Hispanic, predominantly African American, with high concentrations of immigrant communities. And then in those 3 neighborhoods, you also see a majority of homeowners, majority of renters, and then a majority of multifamily structures as opposed to single family. So we tried to be very intentional about how we chose those neighborhoods to cover the full diversity of Dallas. But if you don't see your neighborhood listed, perhaps you'll see your neighborhood reflected in one of the 3 that we highlight. So defining gentrification, mapping the city, neighborhood case studies, and then our policy recommendations. So with that, I will stop there and happy to answer any questions I might have. Yes, sir.
Let's start with one. What is the shared equity housing model? I don't even know what that is.
So it's called shared equity because that's just the name that it has, but it's really a misnomer.
Okay.
And it's more about shared appreciation. So the typical model you see when folks think of shared equity is a community land trust. Are you familiar with the community land trust?
Not very.
And what that looks like? It's the idea that you can separate the unit, the improvement from the land below it. And so a nonprofit or government entity can own the land and sell just the home to a low-income family and then lease the land back to that family for a 99-year term, which is as long as you can legally by law. But the idea is that it's permanent and forever, that relationship, and it's fully inheritable and transferable as well. But the nonprofit or government entity is always going to remain ownership of that land. And you do that to remove the land cost out of the home. So the homeowner is only responsible for their actual equity in the entire property,
Okay.
which is the home. So that's the
Yeah,
most
the
traditional
Yeah,
shared
stay on the
equity model.
improvements. and-
But another way to look at shared equity is just to think about how can the city create long-term or permanent affordability requirements when they are subsidizing projects, either through TIF or PFC or HFC, however they're doing it, or through their regular NOFA process. And they can do that through creating long-term affordability compliance periods. And when I say long-term, I mean a minimum of 30 years. Most city programs right now are max 15, some are only 5. And when we do that, we are putting a significant amount of subsidy into one unit, and then we're losing it within 5 years because that unit can turn over, be sold to the next highest bidder, and we've created a lot of equity for one family who's able to sell and run and hopefully purchase somewhere else. They can find something else for that same price, but we've lost that unit for the neighborhood, and there's no vision for long-term affordability. So from a city perspective, they can do that with the long-term affordability requirements, resale restrictions, capping the appreciation on the sale of the home, how much the homeowner can sell it for, and then rights of first refusal so they can recapture that property and put it back into their affordable housing portfolio.
So you achieve some of that with the stabilization overlay that you're talking about, because if your neighbor wants to sell their house and you make a lot of money, I'm wondering how that all works out with the economics.
Yeah, the neighborhood stabilization overlay is another, it's another tool. It's not connected to the shared equity. The neighborhood stabilization overlay, well, what we're calling it is displacement mitigation zoning overlay. Because we have a neighborhood stabilization overlay right now, an NSO in the city of Dallas, but it really has no teeth and it doesn't offer real protections for neighborhoods. So we have one in West Dallas in the La Bahama neighborhood. And it does not even restrict height. It only restricts the height plane. And once developers found that out, they started taking advantage of it. And they made sure the front facade complied with the height plane, and then they just kept building up and up and up. So you'll see all these homes that, just go like that. And this is a really old, not technically historic, but I would say historic neighborhood. I meant it doesn't have a historic designation officially, right? But it is a historic neighborhood. What you're seeing is this grossly incompatible development. And when you have that in an area, they're then incentivizing the tear down of the older structures. There's no incentive for preservation, and that's what we're trying to do, is just to restrict the footprint of what can be built there in order to have some sort of preservation impact on the existing structures. And that's something, so I will say we entered into this MOU with the city back in 2023, but the city has also been going through its own planning processes, from Forward Dallas to the Dallas housing policy of the 2023 housing policy, and then the action plan. So we've been actively advocating for a lot of this within those two efforts, and have seen a lot of this language adopted as policy. But of course, policy is just the first step. Then you have to actually create the ordinance, or create the program, and make it law or implement it in that way. So that's what we're currently trying to do. But the displacement mitigation zoning overlay is something you can find in Forward Dallas as well.
Stephanie?
Yes.
One question I have, first of all, I'm glad I listened to this. This displacement mitigation overlay zone, is that a recommendation or is it a tool that has already been implemented? Like This is why I asked.
Yeah.
This looks like it's based on residential, idea is for single family
Mhm.
residences, right? But some of the areas I see, like on the east side of 45, all the commercial areas and on the Elm Street,
Mhm.
right now, a lot of development is not happening because of parking requirements. Ultimately, since they are closer to downtown, all those single-story warehouses that are commercial spaces, they call for a bigger and higher use.
Mhm.
But a lot of times the developers can't do it because there's not enough parking.
Yeah.
And there have been a lot of, same thing is in design district.
Yes.
So, but I saw your overlays were covering those areas as well. So was there any, first question, was there any distinction between truly residential neighborhoods versus
Yeah.
these old historic commercial neighborhoods or single-story warehouses?
I haven't made a recommendation for where to put those overlays yet. These maps are just mapping where gentrification is happening from a residential perspective. We're not looking at commercial at all. But to your question about parking, I wanted to mention this earlier when the applicant was presenting, and he mentioned why it can't be a church because of the parking requirements. The city just voted on Wednesday to eliminate parking requirements for commercial uses, and for, religious institutions as well. So the city's moving in a direction to address that very specific issue. And it's minimized, parking on, residential uses as well.
Doesn't mean that it meets the commercial requirements or the church, they need the parking, even though the city's not required, and then they still need to do.
Yes, that's the idea when you reduce or eliminate parking minimums, is that the market will then determine how much is needed for that space. But if you're talking about specifically the commercial and industrial uses, that they were not viable because of parking requirements, that shouldn't be an issue anymore.
Yeah, no, that was really what was on my mind, because I've seen lots of people come. I'm a civil engineer, a parking analyst, so I do this a lot.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, more than half of the developments that could happen can't satisfy the parking requirements, so they don't go away, but they have nothing to do with the gentrification part.
Yeah.
It's just, we have just too much parking.
So our position on it is a little different than the cities and from most folk housing advocates. We think reduction in parking is considered a development right. Anything that makes your development more marketable, more feasible, more profitable, is a bargaining chip that cities and government entities can and should use in exchange for community benefit.
Yeah.
So if we determine the community benefit is, okay, now a business can operate here when it couldn't before, that's fine. But from a residential perspective, if we're talking about decreasing costs to ultimately decrease rents or sales prices as well, I don't think it's enough to make that assumption. I think cities should require de-restricted affordability in exchange for those development rights.
And then second part of my question, I'm just thinking out loud. I used to live in Bluffview area, like right off of Shortcrest. And it was a neighborhood that was in transition. I actually bought a house that some builder bought. The older house there was probably, 2,400 square feet. It was like almost 3/4 of an acre lot. The builder built about 6,000 square foot house on it. But whatever builder paid for the lot, if he won't build the maximum house on it, he can recoup the money. So let's say that you don't want that bigger house. What that meant is that the original seller who was selling the land would also make less money. So isn't that a double-edged sword? How do you?
It is.
And then what happened is while I was living there, there was a very old couple. They had exactly 1,400 square feet single-story house next to mine. The gentleman passed away and his kids wanted to now sell the land, and they were just, I'm sure it's gonna, for their family's benefit, they want to sell it to a builder who's gonna figure out, hey, I'm gonna put another 5,000 square foot house on it.
Yeah.
And if we say that you can't do it, that family will get hurt.
It is a double-edged sword. And here's the thing, without regulation, without intervention, the market is going to dictate what happens, and the market is going to do what the market is made to do, and that is to maximize profit, always.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to prioritize anything else over profit, if we want to prioritize people, affordability, walkability, neighborhood character, design, that's where we come in. So if we want to say, all right, we understand our number one goal is to make sure every property owner can maximize their profit in return, then we don't do anything. But if we say also, actually, this neighborhood has a very historic or cultural character, and it's not just in the buildings, but it's in the people, it's in the small businesses that are there, it's in the community they have created. We have to do things to come in and protect it at the expense of a property owner maximizing their return.
I was thinking about that too, because I was like, is there a way to make up the gap? So that the developer doesn't have to, have you explored setting up?
I mean, there should be some limitations.
Yeah,
I get it, but it can be draconian that, hey, you cannot exceed original footprint.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to be sensible, and that can only happen by putting code in place.
Yes.
That pretty much defines it.
I mean, now we're in competition with a lot of suburbs and
Yeah.
people are making decisions on where to move businesses. They're
Yeah.
looking at, they're looking at.
And then if we do it like that is why it's actually pissed me off for the longest time.
Right.
And I used to work for the city,
Yeah.
but we made our development process so difficult. That is why you see all that development up in Frisco. I wish we had that development down here. We
Yeah.
would see high-rise buildings and cranes here, but if we make it so difficult for a developer, nothing is gonna happen.
Well, I was thinking about that family, if there was a way to make that gap, to do what we all agree, I've worked on the Deck Park, the 10th Street Historic District, it's very vulnerable, I think you're showing it in yellow.
Yes.
Same time, you'd love to be able to give that family the opportunity to create wealth,
Yes.
right? But you wouldn't want to disincentivize someone from building something new, but if you could make the gap, then he or she wouldn't have to build something so large to, make a
Yeah.
profit, but you'd have to fund the money from somewhere else so that they get fair market value, right?
Here's the thing, there's always profit to be made. The
Yeah.
question is how much.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And
Yeah.
are some jurisdictions, have they not been able to help the process by capping property taxes on properties where the families have been there for several generations, so that somebody comes in and builds a new one, their property taxes are 5 times what this
Yeah.
family's property taxes. And now they sell it, that changes obviously for the new owner.
Yeah. That's not something we've seen in Texas. In Philadelphia, they have something called the Loop. It's the Long Time Owners Protection and something. And if you've been in your residence for, I think, 10+ years and your property triples in a short time, they'll just cap it. They'll freeze it at that triple rate and then it doesn't go up anymore. In Texas, we have actually looked at, after we did this toolkit, this is very much a City of Dallas toolkit. Our next step was to look at, what can we do from a state perspective to protect property taxes? So we actually have another toolkit, which we call our state property tax reform guide. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to share that out as well. But it's a tough thing to do, to convince the state to protect certain populations of people. So we looked at what are the kind of uniform and equitable reforms that we could push for that would have the impact of protecting our most vulnerable and low-income homeowners. But actually, one thing that we have done, Voters of Hope, is we've enacted our own property tax relief program. So for long-term West Dallas homeowners, if you've lived in your home for 10+ years, and you meet our income requirements, and you're struggling to pay your property taxes, we will first help you apply for your homestead exemption. We will then help you protest your property valuation. And after we've done both of those things and you still can't afford your taxes, we will help you pay your tax bill. But that is all subject to funding availability and the generous support of our funders to allow us to make that happen.
So, quick question, the anti-displacement mitigation overlay, is that detailed in here? What, is that developed, I guess?
It's not fully developed. It's slightly detailed in here. It's slightly detailed in Forward Dallas. It's something that we do need to continue to work with city staff to push
That
through.
was in the
But
detail.
there was a lot of support at the City Plan Commission when that was included in the language, and it was voted on unanimously to include it. But yes, the devil is in the details.
Well, I mean, if they approve something, they don't know what's in it.
No, they just proved the policy language that this is something we want to prioritize. It hasn't been created or drafted yet.
Okay,
So that's why the comprehensive land use plan is just a forward-thinking vision, right? It's not the actual zoning ordinance or.
Yeah, I would sit down, so, Kevin's back, yeah, there's gonna be some conflicting goals, right? with
Of course.
the economic development, but I definitely think.
Of course.
We're gonna kind of weave that together.
Yeah, and I think this displacement mitigation zoning overlay, it's not just about where gentrification is happening. You also have to look at where you have high concentrations of that naturally occurring affordable housing that is specifically at risk of tear down and redevelopment. Because we are also losing affordable housing units in the city far faster than we're replacing them. And if, CPAL, Cal Poverty Action Lab, and a few other groups have done these projections, and it's very bleak, what we're gonna be looking at in 10 years without some serious intervention. Yeah.
we talk about looping into the state, I think the state's way ahead of you on some of this, are they not? There's a lot of legislation bouncing around, right now, it may not be now, because they cut off what's gonna get baked, because state's already out of bubble, but what do you think about what the legislature has been doing that would impact this?
I think there's likely more harm happening than good. There's a very scary tenant bill that's aiming to gut all tenant rights, the few that folks have in Texas. And then there are others that seek to kind of deregulate housing in order to create,
Those have
make that
particularly strange teams supporting them too.
Yes, and from our perspective, that it's, when you kind of cut away that red tape and deregulate and make it easier, perhaps you're cutting costs and paving a way to more development activity, but there's no research that shows that that is going to have an impact on our most vulnerable residents. So, and then there's some that even allow for preemption of local government control, and that's very concerning for us, because that's where I think we have the most opportunity to impact change at the local level. So
Okay.
thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
I'm glad somebody's paying attention.
Thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you.